Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual nature talk about native plants. I'm so glad you could join us today. Before we get started with Drake White and Joan Miller, I wanted to tell you about the Phil Hardbrooker Park Conservancy. The Conservancy is a member-based nonprofit that bridges the gap between San Antonio and nature by bringing free nature programs to the public. They also protect the natural habitat of the park through advocacy, fundraising, and promotion. If you enjoy the programs that we offer in the park, please consider supporting the Conservancy through a donation or by becoming a member. Visit philhardbrookerpark.org to learn more. This talk will be recorded and shared on our website. Please turn off your video and mute your microphone. This helps reduce background noise. So today we have Drake White and Joan Miller here to talk to us about native plants. So guys, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks. I'm Joan Miller. I'm with the Native Plant Society of Texas, and I've been doing this walk for, I think, at least 5 years or so now. It's a little different every single year, and we try to focus on plants that are in the landscape here that are very beneficial and useful in your own landscapes at home. I'd say pretty much everything we discuss here I probably have in my yard at home as well. So, yeah, there's also, well, actually, Drake, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, and I'm Drake White, and I am owner of the Nectar Bar, Texas Master Naturalist, and with the Native Plant Society. And pretty much too here, everything that you'll probably see here, I pretty much have in my landscape as well. So a lot of the things that we'll talk about will be very useful and beneficial for your own landscapes or habitats that you might be trying to restore.
And also, I've done a handout that's available online that should be available on the Conservancy website that pretty much covers everything we're going to cover today. I've counted about 22 plants that we hope to manage to do in an hour, but it'll give you information on how to maybe acquire that plant, you know, whether by seed or buying it, or if it's a volunteer in your landscape, and a little bit about the plant and also its wildlife value. So I guess with that, we'll just go ahead and get started. We're here at the Urban Ecology Center right outside the office at Hardbrooker Park. And one of our first things that we're going to talk about here is the buttonbush, which is that large plant shrub here in the background. This area is quite moist, so everything that's planted in here does like some moisture, although extremely drought tolerant. It's a large plant, not appropriate for all landscapes, I admit, but if you have some space, it's got those beautiful round pincushion balls, basically, and you can see there's a little sweat bee of some sort on one of them down there. It is just a magnet, and I'll let Drake talk more about what's attracted to it, but it can be pruned to a more useful size, but it really is an area, if you've got some moisture or even a creek or a dry creek running through your property, there's a good chance you can have this. And Drake might even have it in her own yard.
Yes, I actually have it in a couple different spots in my yard. So there was an area that I really wanted to utilize that many of us, well actually probably all of us have, is where the AC condenser kind of drips and drains out. I actually made a little collection of a damp moist area with it because I wanted to utilize that. I didn't want it just to go to waste and not be used. So this is one of the plants that I have in there, and I definitely trim it back often, probably 3 or 4 times throughout the year, just to keep it at a height that I would want it not to get too out of control. So this is one that definitely you can trim multiple times without damaging it. It helps produce more flowers. And it is a pollinator magnet. Everything is on hummingbirds, butterflies, bees. It attracts everything. And the scent from it is kind of like a light, very honey-ish kind of smell. A little hint of floral, but more of a almondy, not lemon, honey scent to it. And it kind of permeates. So like right now it's a little bit humid, so you can kind of smell it because the humidity kind of just whiffs it right up in there. But it's a great, great nectar source. It's easily controlled. I also have it in actual pond. And it's not a big pond. It's just really one of those plastic ponds. You dig it up and put it in. And it's sitting right on the side. So it's actually in. So if you have like a pond that you needed something in the water, this is good. If you need it kind of to be out and just be kind of soak up damp areas, a rain garden, this would be perfect in a rain garden as well. But you would want to definitely keep an eye on the space that you have and how big and things, but it is controlled and you can keep it to a size that you would like.
All right. I think next thing we'll talk about here is the Turks Cap. And that one is readily available in nurseries. You can dig it up from a friend's yard. You can do it from seed as well. And it's got, unfortunately, maybe we'll see some down the hill there. I don't see any blooms on it right now, but it's got this beautiful, bright, like cardinal red, turban-like flower that's part of the hibiscus family, which is definitely attractive to hummingbirds. And one beautiful thing is everyone's looking for what can I put in shade in my yard. This is great understory, under trees and shade, drought tolerant, but sure, it really responds to some moisture. I've got it where my downspouts come down. And it is deciduous, so it will lose its leaves in the winter. You know, you probably can cut it down to a height that you want, or just leave it, which I tend to do through the winter. And even right now, if I had this in my yard and it was in front of something that I didn't want completely blocked, I'd easily cut that down by half and just keep it to a more manageable height. So. But it's a great landscape plant.
Yeah, and definitely don't be afraid. A lot of people are afraid to trim and cut their plants. Try to think of it like, even if it has flowers, and if you were to cut this by half, you're going to get more flowers. So I know people tend to be afraid to trim back their plants, especially if it has flowers on it. You're not going to harm it. It actually benefits. It's kind of like us getting a haircut. So it'll benefit, it'll bush out, and it'll give you more flowers, and it'll be a healthier plant. This is also, you can eat the flowers, and you can make tea from the flowers as well if you're a tea drinker. So it's many benefits for us, and since it's in the Mallow family, this is also a host plant for the hair-streaked butterflies.
And also the fruit on it is edible to humans and birds. Yep. Birds like to eat it. So another great one. Over here, we'll take a look at this plant, which is Monarda, bee balm, horse mint, whatever have you. It's got a lot of common names to it. And it's an annual, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. And very attractive, as you can see, with these different layers of inflorescences, you know, the flowers there. And insects, of course, love it. It does very well, you know, it's very drought tolerant. A little bit of moisture, of course, will help keep it going. But it's a really nice thing to, you know, and this one is even intermixed with some Mealy blue sage. But
and this is another one that's edible for us too, if we wanted to make some tea or whatnot with the leaves and the flowers as well. But if you have this in your landscape, it is Hummingbird Heaven. Hummingbirds absolutely love it. Butterflies absolutely love it. It's a great benefit plant, and it will, if you have one, it will just kind of multiply out over the years.
Yeah, it'll seed out, exactly. It takes care of itself, which is a nice thing too, that you'll just keep getting it back year after year, and maybe even growing its footprint a little bit.
Yep, definitely.
So, yeah, so that's good.
And another plant that we'll talk about is this little tiny itty bitty plant
Here's
down
one bloom, unfortunately. Oh, there's another little bloom over there, but
another one right here.
This is don't let it deter you as a great ground cover. This is frog fruit.
Yes, this is a wonderful, wonderful ground cover. If you are looking to actually get rid of your lawn, this is a great one to put in instead. It grows in wet feet, dry feet, full sun, full shade. It's happy anywhere. It does take every bit of 12 weeks to get it established, but once it's established, it's set in, and it'll spread pretty quickly. Its fastest growth rate, from my experience, seems to be between April and July. Then it kind of tapers off, and it won't grow as quickly. But definitely in the beginning, if you planted it in spring, it grows pretty fast. It can thicken. If you see there, it's kind of grows by runners, and as it lays across the ground, it'll just touch the moist dirt, and then it gets these, at each little node, it'll get little roots that'll attach to the ground, and that's how it kind of spreads out. And so if you have a really damp area, that's maybe you're having, this is great erosion control as well. So if you're having some areas that are damp or constantly, you know, have water that sits after a good heavy rain. If you have a rain garden, this is great for on the edges and in the rain garden as well. This is a host plant for 3 different butterflies: the Phaeon crescent, the common buckeye, and the white peacock. So 3 different butterflies use this, but a lot of pollinators use it as well. You'll get a lot of different little butterflies on it, as well as bees and native bees. So it's useful all the way around.
Yeah, and it's does well in the shade. It's a little rangier, but I have seen it at a friend's house in the sun. That it is dense and thick, and it has it's in full flower right now, with, you know, the flower sticking up that much. It's just a beautiful little show, and someone I know who's replacing, well, parts of her St. Augustine lawn with it as well, and it just, I'm jealous of her because mine never looks that good.
Yep, and mine, I have the same thing in mine as well. I have no lawn where there would have been a lawn. It's frog fruit as well, and it's just gorgeous right now. And even in a couple of places and landscapes where I have put it in as a new lawn, even through the winter and our past freeze just this past year, was evergreen, and it did really good. So it looks fabulous right now. So yeah, walk this way.
All right, so we'll head down here a little bit, and so just as a reminder, just right behind us here is, that's more of the Turks Cap. So it's much lower, maybe because it's getting a little more sun. I don't know. Maybe it's been pruned back. Unfortunately, still not in bloom, but you can see that back along the base there. But the reason I stopped is this is the Texas Lantana, and it's quite rangy. Not too tall growing, but there are many species of Lantana available in the tree nursery or in the plant nurseries. You really only want the Texas, the native one, because it's not invasive. The other ones, the one that everyone sees, the kind of pink and baby blue one, that's highly invasive, and you know, it puts out a lot of seed that mockingbirds just love. But it doesn't seem that this one spreads as much as the non-native one. And you know, one of the reasons we talk about a lot of these natives is because of their value to, you know, local insect populations and whatnot. So, you know, this is another magnet for butterflies. It does lose its leaves in the winter. You can, you know, cut it back to contain it. This one is sprawling, which is quite nice along this this curb here. But if you don't want it this big right now, don't be afraid to cut off those blooms and, you know, get it back to where you want it to be. It'll just come right back.
Yeah,
So.
it's really easy. If you have one of these in your landscape, it's literally, if you have no time and for anything, no effort, this is a very effortless plant. You could literally plant it, water it in, and oh my goodness, I forgot all about it, and it's going to do just like this. It takes barely any establishment time. It really is just super hardy. And even if you live in an apartment or maybe a small condo or townhouse where you don't have a garden space, this does really well in pots as well. So if you want something that just really attracts all kinds of pollinators and hummingbirds and things like that, this is really a good one that even in a pot you can ignore it, and it really will still show off for you. Very low maintenance.
Yeah, it's a great one. And back in here then, this is a nice showing of inland sea oats. Inland sea oats is a wonderful shade-loving, moisture-loving as well, but really shade-loving plant that grows. It dies back to the ground in the winter. I mean, you'll have sort of gray tan stalks and leaves and seed heads on it, but right now those seed heads are just beautiful off those kind of a nodding stem there, just dangling. It just really
like
is nice.
Plant jewelry.
Yeah, that's right. It's like jewelry. And I mean, it's easy to grow. It does spread, but easy to control. When you know what something looks like in its small stage after it's reseeded, it is so easy to just pull it out to contain where you want it to be. You don't have to let it get away. And not that this one is one that really gets away, but some people, I think, tend to forget about it, and then they think they've got too much of it. But I absolutely love it. It's great filler. It's a great mass planting. Like I said, it's wonderful in shade, which is challenging for a lot of people. So
and some of the things that we don't always necessarily think about when talking about native grasses is the native grasses that are needed for pollinators. Because it doesn't necessarily show some really pretty flower, we don't think that it's useful. But we need our native grasses for our grass skippers in order to continue their population and life cycle going as well. So this is really a good host plant for our skippers. So if you have an area that and it grows in full sun as well. It'll get really tall in full sun, but in the shade it grows really well in the shade as well. So if you don't have an area that has a lot of sun, but you want to put some attractive native grasses, this is definitely one. And then you're still planting for pollinators.
Yeah, and another thing too, it's one of the, just kind of in terms of maintenance, we really, we tend to buy or practice just don't cut everything down right at the end of fall or the beginning of winter, if at all, because these provide structure and habitat for overwintering insects or their eggs. And insects, we're all starting to realize that insects are what we want in our landscapes.
Yes.
They're for the birds, they're for other little critters, and it's just, to the point now where I look at my plants and I look at the leaves and say, well, is anyone eating you? That's, okay, good, then you're functioning in my landscape.
Yep, and that's the beautiful thing about learning about your landscape is, yes, we want to see aesthetically things that are pretty and nice, but understanding that they should not be perfect. So if you look at this little hackberry here, it's kind of eaten up, but I mean, that's how things are supposed to kind of look. And once your habitat is in balance, you won't get things that look so chopped up and eaten up down to stems. You'll just have here and there a leaf or so that might be eaten, and then you know that you have a nice healthy habitat that's working.
And then just here's a bit of a close-up of the buttonbush as well, and some of these that have gone to seed, or going to seed anyway, and which are also eaten by insects. I guess I'm going to do that, but maybe just go over to the frostweed. And here again is, a lovely, that's a dusky wing butterfly of some sort, Drake.
Oh, yes, it is. Yep.
On the Texas Lantana
Yes.
down there. So you'll always find someone, and that's the thing, that's what kills me more is if I do prune back some of my plants because I think that they need it. It's not the flowers that I'm cutting off. It's then when I see a little butterfly or something come out that's been sheltering under there during the day, and that's that's what gets me, and you know, and I apologize to them.
Yes, I do the same thing, and yes, believe it or not, many of these butterflies will actually roost and kind of hang out in there overnight because that's where they're kind of staying.
Yeah.
And it's nice once you start kind of seeing everything blending in and mixing well together and becoming a healthy ecosystem, you are able to appreciate some of those things more as well.
So this right here is our area's unofficial native pollinator plant of the year. We try to, through the Texas Butterfly Ranch, Monica Mackley comes once, has encouraged us all to come up with a pollinator plant of the year, and that's what this one is. This is frostweed, and it's a fall blooming plant. Usually grows up under in the shade of trees. In the winter, you see them kind of all these dead skeletons underneath these oak mottes. But it's a single stalked plant. Well, actually, you get more stalks as time goes on, but they are individual stalks coming up with this great sort of leaf tissue along the edge, which helps with identification of it. And with these large leaves alternately up the stalk, you can see this one, I don't know if it's been broken, because I've heard that deer won't bother these generally, which surprises me. But if it's too tall for your landscape, you can, in the summer, you know, beginning of the summer, cut it back partly. This one, you can see it broke off here. It's a great example because you'll see that it's putting out more leaves there, so it'll bush out a little more at the top.
And this is definitely a landscape plant that I use, and I definitely encourage. Usually June 1st, I say, hey, you know what? It's time to trim this back, whatever height that it is. I'll go ahead and cut it back by at least half. In my own habitat, I cut it back 3/4 because this can get every bit of 5 to 6 foot tall. But once the fall bloom comes on it, then it tends to want to fall over. So if you don't want to stake it up and mess with all that, if you cut it back, then you won't have that problem. It becomes a little stockier of a plant, bushes out, and you'll get more blooms because it's forcing out, as we saw over here where new growth is growing out. Each one of those will get some blooms on it. This is one of my favorites because this is one of the main nectar sources for the monarchs during fall migration. So if you have this, you will definitely be a roosting stop because over everything else that I have in my habitat, this is the one that they go to in the fall. This is also a host plant for the border patch butterfly. So it's a double use plant as a host plant and a nectar source. So host plant just basically meaning that it is the plant that the adult butterfly.
Someone's eaten it, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe a caterpillar, maybe not. But.
Yep, the adult butterfly will come, lay her eggs, and then the eggs hatch and the caterpillars eat the leaves. So we definitely want both nectar and host plants, and you'll have a double in your landscape if you have that. Great plant.
Yeah.
And how it got its name too, a cool little fun fact is when we get freezes, which aren't very typical here, but we had a nice long freeze here this past winter. It will kind of, all the moisture and water and chemical makeup of the plant will burst at the seams and create big ribbons of ice or frost, and that's how it kind of got its name, frostweed. Great plant. And this is also one that in the winter time when it's gone dormant, I leave the stalks. These stalks are perfect for native bees that burrow in and put their eggs in, and then those, they will come out. If for aesthetic reasons, for whatever, you don't want to look at it, you don't want to, deal with it, or your HOA says, oh, you need to cut that back, cut it and lay it down on the ground in the same area that it's at. That way, at least when in spring, when everything kind of awakes and comes out, that they're still in your habitat and you're not throwing it out to be somewhere else.
Yeah, don't put it in your green bin.
Yes.
Just leave it.
Just leave it be. If you have to cut it, just cut it and lay it down on the ground.
So we'll head over to that planting island now. So, one of the great landscape plants is the live oak, but I think everyone knows about it. and we're not going to cover it here because I think everyone's pretty aware of how great those are in their landscapes. Host for tons and tons of caterpillars and other insects, and very important for then birds feeding their babies during the nesting season. So.
And the same with the hackberries. As much as people like to call them trash trees, hackberries actually feed 268 different species of wildlife, including butterflies, nectarine moths, and they obviously feed birds and other mammals as well.
Yeah. One thing about the hackberry is for identification, it tends to often have this kind of warty bark on it. They're sort of warts and very, very rough. And then with the lichen, sort of the mottled color as well. That sort of helps with identification. All species of hackberry have the pretty much the same shaped leaf, which looks like that, and it's asymmetrical on the base, and then you can see that there's 3 main veins that come from the base of the leaf. And believe it or not, there's not other plants that have that leaf. So, you know, because everyone says, well, yeah, that's what all leaves look like. Well, actually, that's not true. And there's lots of species of hackberry, so you don't have to really worry about what species you're seeing. Sometimes it's just nice to know it's a hackberry.
Yep.
And yes, they're underneath your power lines, they're along your fences because birds eat the berries. The berries have an incredibly high fat content, so that they're great for winter sources of energy for birds. But then, of course, they deposit them all over your neighborhood. And feel free to take some out, take plenty out. I mean, and if it's right by your house, they tend to be weak wooded or over your driveway where your car is, because then the aphids like them and you've got dew. There's plenty of good places for hackberry. And I just say it's nice to learn to appreciate them because they are a great part of our landscape and our areas here.
Yeah, and usually we'll see them, if you remember in the beginning, up over by the button bush, there was a small little one. And I tend to keep a few like that here and there just because as they slowly start to grow, the butterflies love to lay their eggs on the new growth, and that's easily reached for me, so I can continue education and watching that within my own habitats. But definitely, I mean, it's a great tree. You can keep cutting it back or dig it out as it's small, and it's pretty easily removed when you can catch them when they're small. And you can kind of touch them. It feels like sandpaper. Yeah. So even just touching them, you'll know that hey, that's a hackberry, because hey, it kind of feels like sandpapery.
Yeah, but yeah, this kind of just keep an eye on your landscape. When you see them coming up, you just, if you can, pull them, or else you just go ahead and clip them. So we'll look over here. There's quite a lot of persimmons here.
Yes.
I was noticing though, in the parking lot, they've got some gorgeous persimmons. These are just sort of kind of infill here, I guess, but in general, the persimmon, they're male and female trees, so to get the berries on them, which are consumed by birds, you obviously need a female. I'm not seeing any fruits on these right now, but the one thing about the persimmon is it's just got this beautiful smooth bark that sort of and then even some of it will flake off, and you get this really, really smooth gray underneath, kind of like crepe myrtles. And so we like to talk about, well, it's not a colorful replacement for crepe myrtle, but it's a native that is quite attractive. And you know, this whole area in here, you can see this one over here has got a much lighter bark. Persimmons are usually, they can be available in the nursery trade. They're hard to dig up because they do have an incredible root system on them. But this is kind of one of the ones, though, that if you've got a new piece of property that's just been developed and they've scraped it down for construction, what you find, though, is that they can resprout. And this one over here, I'm just going to walk in. But this one right here, they cut this one off for some reason. It's resprouted there, you can keep something like that even as a shrub. You can keep it pruned back and have a nice persimmon shrub, or maybe one of those might grow big enough to become another tree or something. But they're just such a beautiful, welcome addition to landscapes too. And but generally, people who have females, you don't plant them over your driveway or your sidewalk, because it's got that marble-sized berry or fruit that's black when it's ripe, that will stain. So
But that fruit is also good for us. It's pretty yummy. It's not necessarily pull off the tree and eat it like that, but you would use it for kind of pies and jellies and jams, and it's pretty decent. So it's an edible fruit for us as well as habitat. But yes, as Joan said, you don't want to plant something like that close to your driveway or sidewalks, just because it will stain.
Let's see. Well, in here, this is kind of a nice bed of rock rose. Rock rose, it's a member of the Mallow family. It blooms all summer long. It's one of those great ones. And it blooms mostly in the morning, tends to by the evening. They've closed up. New ones open in the morning. It will seed out. It will grow quite a bit. It's very brittle, but also takes very well to cutting back to the size where you want it.
Yeah, and you can keep that cut back all year round too. So it's fine. It's not going to harm the plants. Again, don't be afraid to trim and cut back your plants. It's not showing on this right now, but this one usually gets like a little gray powderiness on it. It's called powdery mildew. And it doesn't need anything. If it happens to get that on it, just leave it alone. It takes care of itself. I remember last year this had a lot on it, but as you can see, there's nothing on it now. So it doesn't harm the plant in any way. Just ignore it. It's part of the ecosystem with it. And this, since it also, this is in the Mallow family, this is also a host plant for the hairstreak butterflies.
Yeah, and you can see again with the powdery mildew, it's still going to bloom, so it's still functioning in your landscape, whether by structure for things being able to escape in there, or just the flying plants or insects going into it for nectar. And I mean, hummingbirds as well will use this, as well as butterflies and other little bees and wasps and stuff. So and that one, again, easily you can plant it by seed. It will seed around. You can dig some up, share it with your friends. I mean, this is what they look like when they've just come out of the ground from seed. You can dig those up, share them around, put them somewhere else you want them, and also readily available in the nursery trade. And in terms of plants as well, we usually have 2 plant sales. Native Plant Society has 2 plant sales every year, in the spring and the fall. We don't know what we're doing for the fall yet, but we've also got a program called Plants by Donation, where we've got members of Native Plant Society have these plants in their yards. They've potted them up, or maybe they just even have some that say, you can come and dig some up from me if you want. And we've got a list online, and you can contact, say the contact person who's on the website, say, I'm interested in this plant, and they'll put you in touch with the person who has the plant. And then if you choose to, then we've got a donation button on the site. So if you feel you can pay, that's great. If you can't pay, that's fine, because we want everyone to have native plants, and we've got a lot of plants out there for people. So it's npsot.org /San Antonio, and you can find that there. So just so you know that there are places to get these. I guess the Mealy Blue Sage was going to be one of our next ones.
Yes. This is a really, really great nectar source. This is loved by pretty much everything. As you can see, some of the bees are skipping along through it too. Hummingbirds absolutely love this. and it's a very low maintenance. This is another one that you can plant it, water it in, and oh my goodness, I forgot about it, and it will just show off for you. It'll just go berserk and say, hey, look at me. But so it's really easy to maintain and really easy to care for. So it's it'll die back in the winter. Keep the stalks, again, keep the stalks so that our native bees and other insects can use it for overwintering, and then it just grows right back in spring.
And it can also handle some summer pruning as well.
Yes.
Once the first bloom is just gorgeous. Then it's kind of rangy and scrappy, waiting for rainfall. And some of the leaves aren't as good looking. So you can do some cutting back of that, and then it'll come back for the fall again. It's just beautiful in the fall. So that's you can leave some, you can cut some depending on where it is in your yard. But also once they've bloomed, they do have seeds, and goldfinches just love them too. So they'll perch up here and pull out seeds on that.
Yep, and as you can see, it likes to be in with things.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
don't worry about using, if you have a space like just I need to fill this space, but maybe it's a strange shape. As you can see, this kind of is almost like a C shape here, and it's filled in really, really nicely, and it's okay being right next to some other things like the rock rose here. There's some frostweed back there, and this beautiful grass. And this is Lindheimer
Mealy.
Lindheimer Mealy. So it's really tucked in there, and it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay to have some things kind of tucked in, and this gives a perfect habitat for all kinds of insects and other little critters that want to run in there and escape from predators. So this is a perfect little habitat area for everything, really.
Yeah. And then this grass right here, the Lindheimer or Big Muley is another way it's called. There's quite a few of them planted in here. You see them, they're all over our area now. It's naturally found closer to a creek, but it's so drought tolerant. It's just wonderful. It performs really well. It's got a nice form to it. Usually it's too often it's planted too close to a sidewalk, so then people are cutting it off right there. These are nicely placed far enough away so that they can just naturally come to the edge of the sidewalk. But it's such a pretty pale green color. And then in late summer, or in summer, this one seems a little early, it's putting up a flower stalk right now. Which then get very big and kind of lacy looking then when they go to seed, and they usually stay up through the fall into the winter. And grasses are another one of these things where we do not recommend cutting them back. Yeah. You can leave it. In nature, they're just left. And you can see this one has some of last year's, they're gray, last year's, oops, there we go, leaves on it. But if you feel like, well, I just want to clean it up a little bit, either put on some gloves and in the spring just rake it out with your hands, or a rake, but not too early, because I've had the mistake, before I knew better, cleaning it out one year, maybe it was in the winter even, well, it's February, I should get the yard ready, and there was a big sphinx moth that was living in there. So there's things that overwinter in there too. So you want to maintain that for their protection until it's time for them to come out.
Yes, but one of the big things that I would really like to let folks know, because I see it happen so often, is when this has died back, they will literally cut it. They will cut it just right down to about 6 inches from the ground.
Or like a meatball.
Yep. And that does not benefit. And usually when that starts to grow back, it grows back lopsided. So it's meant to be like this. Allow it just to grow back naturally. As Joan said, you know, put some gloves on and rake it with your fingers, or you can use like one of those little hand rakes to gently go in and kind of get that out. But just remember, in spring, as this starts to get green up, the brown stuff, I've had birds go in and take that for nesting as well. So it's beneficial all the way around, because in winter, it's hiding the insects that need to live there to overwinter. But then in spring, the birds need it for their nesting material. So I just kind of like to leave it be. But if anything, please just don't cut it back, because it actually damages your plant.
And in here, another one that I kind of wanted to point out was the Agarita, which is a very spiny plant. When new leaves come out, they're quite rubbery and soft, and I mean, I think even deer will eat them. But it's a great plant if you want to protect an area that you don't want people walking through or something. It's got this beautiful bright yellow inside of the twig underneath the bark. And this can be pruned to any shape. This one's been definitely left a little more natural, and which is great. But you know, in your own landscape, you can get one of these. You can condense it and shape it to what you want it to be, and then late winter, January, February, depending on the year, because we're so variable here. Beautiful, bright yellow flowers that, you know, attract the earliest of any nectar searching insects out there, and then and a nice red berry as well afterwards.
And this too is the you can use the berries. Obviously, have animals and birds will use the berries, but we can make Agarita jelly. I like to put things in the landscape that is beneficial for us and beneficial for any type of wildlife or insects. So this is not as easily to find in the nurseries. Hopefully we can change that. But this is one that if you have any type of property that was just scraped, as we said before, most likely you might have this coming back up and growing back on your own property. And if you do, just let it, allow it. It's not something that you'll regret. It'll look very similar in structure. Most people, because of the way it's kind of prickly, they'll think that it's holly, but it's not. Definitely, it's most likely an Agarita being here in this area. So if you're not familiar with it and you're more familiar with the holly, and you have something that's naturally growing, then looks like that, and it's very small, I would definitely allow it to stay. It's a great beneficial plant, and it's for shady areas or in sun, so it'll grow kind of anywhere.
No, it's a keeper. Yep. Oh, I guess we can start with this ash juniper. Okay, that's another one. You're never going to find that in the nursery. You're going to find it in your yard, either as a volunteer coming up or it's existing in a new landscape. And again, male and female trees. A lot of people are familiar with the male trees and their high pollen distribution in the winter. But it's an evergreen tree, and it provides really wonderful screening. I mean, the developers, they take it all out, and then they go and they plant a non-native plant in its place. And this, I mean, it takes no maintenance. If you've got a lot of females, yes, you're going to have some little ones coming up. They're very easy to pluck out of the ground, no problem. They can get tall. They can be pruned up to look like more appealing trees to our aesthetic. They can be kept much smaller as a shrub. You know, they do have berries, cedar waxwings. It's called the cedar waxwing for a reason, because it comes to cedar, even though it's an ash juniper.
Yep.
But, you know, a lot of different birds eat the berries. And then, of course, it's the host plant for the Juniper hairstreak butterfly, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous butterfly. And
yeah, I love that butterfly.
Yeah.
It's the color of the leaves of this thing.
Yeah.
It's really, really pretty. And I have yet to find, even though I'm like the butterfly guru, I have yet to see it, but you've been lucky enough to see the
I saw it
caterpillars.
once. It was on a piece of silk coming down underneath an ash juniper, and I looked at it, you know, I caught it and I looked at it and I thought, wow, it looks just like a cedar needle or a little piece of a branch, and I thought, that's it.
Yep.
I finally seen one. So you don't have to look right on the branches. You look for maybe one that's coming down on a piece of
Their
silk.
Yep.
But they really, it's such an underappreciated tree. It's such a hated tree, and
Yes.
I think they're wonderful.
Yeah, and one of the things that many folks don't know too is that if you were to actually take some of the needles from this or some of the berries and make a tea, if you are a person that has allergies to mountain cedar, start making tea of this in December and continue it like every other day or so, and that helps alleviate, if not get rid of it altogether. Yeah, it's one of those things that is one of those love-hate relationships that you can have. It's a wonderful, wonderful tree. I'm distracted because there's a butterfly.
Is that a snout?
And so this is, if you can see, it's a wonderful example of camouflage.
Yeah.
She is right there, and this is a tawny emperor butterfly.
Right.
Whoop, there she goes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so she's probably sitting close to this because this is one of her host plants. So that is another hackberry. They're going to be close to that. She may have been going over there to go and lay some eggs or check out and scout out how much of her food source is available so that she can lay eggs. But yeah, there's a lot of different butterflies. The tawny emperors we saw there, the hackberry emperor, the question mark butterfly, and the red admiral. I'll use that, as well as some others
Probably,
too.
yeah, plenty of others
There's
that
a
we don't
lot.
even know
It's
about.
268 species that use it, so
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Yeah. Another one, quick one, wanted to take a look at here is Zexmania, which is it's got a very, very hairy, rough stalk. Oh, you can see that little insect on it. I think that's a mosquito. All right. Well, okay.
Oh, so it's not a mosquito, but male mosquitoes do nectar like this. They're not the ones that bite us, it's
true.
the females. But this is a type of parasitic fly. And I forget its name, but it's really cool. Some of them are shaped like that, and they have like these little fuzzy feet that look like boots. But yeah, those are a parasitic fly. Those will actually lay their eggs into other insects to continue their life cycle going. So when you see certain things like that, which is it's a great example, hopefully the camera was able to get in and you could actually see it, because these are the small things that you start to notice. And if you have these things, that means your ecosystem is working for you. They're meant to be there.
Yeah. And the Zexmania it's a slightly woody plant, so it's a slightly woody plant, and it is deciduous. It'll lose its leaves in the winter, but it's got these great yellow stalks, the flowers on the stalk up high above the plant, and it will bloom all summer long, mostly after some rain. In the spring, incredible flush, but it will keep going. And I've at times thought, oh, well, maybe it's time to cut it back in the front yard. It's looking a little peaked, maybe I want to clean it up a bit. And that's when I pull in the driveway, and I'll see a goldfinch sitting up here and then pulling out the seeds from the end of that. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'm not touching it. It's functioning there in the landscape. It's feeding the goldfinches, so I just leave it alone. But then there's been years, and I know Drake can tell you more about this, where it was being eaten down by
Yes.
caterpillars. And I'm
Yes.
like, what in the world is that? And then I've learned, and
It's the
what is
border
it?
patch. It's the border patch butterflies
Yeah.
that use it. And the butterfly, nice big spider right there.
Oh yeah, look at that.
I'm easily squirrel gone.
Yeah.
And so the border patch butterfly, they have multiple host plants that they can use. They lay eggs in clusters of 500 plus. And so it can really look like an infestation of caterpillars. And sometimes they really will heavily eat your plant. But it'll grow right back, so just leave it be. But also, as she said, even though there are birds that come in and eat the seeds, there's also birds that will come in and eat the caterpillars as well. So it's feeding a multiple, it has multiple functions for different birds and for different reasons. And as sad as it is, because I'm a butterfly lover, everybody's got to eat. So the birds will eat, the lizards will eat, the spiders will eat, everybody's got to eat.
So we have a couple questions.
Oh, okay.
Danielle asks, how can you find some ash juniper to plant?
Yeah, I've never thought of trying to get it to plant. I mean, personally, I could probably get some about that big that, you know, just pull out of the ground or dig out of the ground to and pot up. And if anyone wanted some, I'd be happy to do that. But that's about I've never seen it available.
Yeah, I've not seen it readily available. And maybe if there's enough interest, if enough people are asking for it, then that could change. See, people don't, or not people, but like the industry, if there's something that you want, you have to let your local nurseries know, hey, do you have this? I want it. And if enough people start asking about it, they're going to start getting it. But if you're not asking for it, they're not going to get it, because, and especially with a juniper, because so many don't see the value in it, or even like a frostweed, they don't necessarily see a value in it until they've educated themselves. Like today, people are here for a reason to learn, and once you've learned, and then you start asking, you have to go to your nurseries and start asking for it. Then they'll start becoming more readily available.
And she also asks, is possum haw a good tree for biodiversity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Possum haw
definitely.
is great. It's got, well, especially the males, the females have berries on them. And I don't know if it's a host plant for anything, but it's great cover, and especially in its natural environment down along creeks. They form thickets, and birds will also nest in them as well. You know, any structure in your landscape.
Yeah, it'll be
and especially if it's a native, it's highly recommended.
Yeah,
so,
and one of the examples that I can even give, I had some in pots getting ready to go into landscapes right before the freeze, and they were full of berries, and I was so happy, because when the freeze was going on, obviously there was nothing else for the birds to eat, and they literally stripped every single berry off. So there was something for them to eat and have something that was provided for them, even in pots, waiting to go into the new landscape. So it's definitely a wonderful plant to have within your landscape to create biodiversity for sure.
All right. Actually, just right here, this is just a nice example of a persimmon, I have to say. That's a nice, that would be a wonderful tree to have in your yard. Nice size, nice form as well. And even this ash juniper over here on the left, you know, it's kind of twisty bark, but I can see there's a squirrel's nest up top. But, you know, that's also a nice size tree to have in your yard. And, you know, this is the other thing, too, when it comes to maintenance of your plants. You don't have to cut off all those dead branches either. If you like birds, you'll probably start noticing that most of the birds you see perching
Yep.
are on branches with no leaves on them. And so that's where they seem to have their best view of things, and so they need that. So, you know, if you feel the need to cut off dead branches, well, leave a couple for the birds anyway. Here's another little clump of Zexmania here, but we were also going to mention just off to the left, here is Indian Mallow. And Indian Mallow is, that's one that kind of just came up in my landscape. Tiny, tiny little yellow flowers that open during the day, and then they've got these seed capsules that you know, will then it'll start spreading around by itself. Here's a seed capsule down here that hasn't it hasn't dried out yet, but that will be full of little seeds. They form little clusters around. They're, you know, they can be cut back.
And as you can see, it'll form out.
Yeah.
It'll, and most likely, I mean, you may actually even purchase a plant from a nursery and it's already got it in there. But most likely, if you look around your yard, you've probably already got it growing. So let's say that this was a great example in your own landscape, and maybe you just wanted it right here, but maybe over there on the edges you didn't. They are easily just pulled out.
Yeah.
And easily maintained. This is another great nectar source, but it's also, since it's in the Mallow family, a host plant for several different hair-streaked butterflies.
And I know that there's one caterpillar that's bright blue, and I've never been lucky enough to have that on my plants at home, but I've seen pictures from other people that one year they had these bright blue caterpillars, and I can't remember to which butterfly those were.
And yeah, and it's a one of the hair streaks, but also with the gray hair streak I've had on, and then they're like a purplish pink also. So depending on which plant it is, sometimes the caterpillar changes its color, but it's really cool, and you have to have the eye for it. It literally looks, when the caterpillar itself in mid-stage looks almost like a like something else, and I can't think of what I'm trying to think of right at this moment. And so as we start to have to wind it up here,
just a quick, there's actually two things here that can be considered good ground cover. This is one down here, the Straggler Daisy, that, well, you know what, no one, they do sell it, but no one really needs to buy it, because I guarantee you have it in your landscape. There's a nice little flower, and it'll bloom quite a bit during the year, and you know, it attracts little pollinators. With moisture, it will stay green. I've seen entire landscapes just covered with this. It will take a mowing because it can get, what, 6-8 inches tall. But it'll also go dormant, I mean, certainly in the winter, but also during a really dry season. But it's a great ground cover, or just a little bit of a filler.
Yes.
And is it a host plant?
It's not a host plant, but it is a good little nectar source. I see lots of little butterflies and little bees that will actually use it. And it's one of the great first spring, late winter blooming plants too, just like a dandelion, that will produce nectar that's needed when there's not much else readily available as well.
And then just over here, I wanted to point out this is Snapdragon Vine. Here's the little flower for it, which is, you know, very similar to a snapdragon. And it can be a ground cover as well. It can grow up a structure. Mine just appeared on my chain link fence by my driveway one year, and I collected seeds, and I put it as ground cover around you know, around my yard. Yes, sometimes it's kind of gotten on top of the cone flowers, and I've had to rake it back and pull it back, but it's a beautiful little plant that will bloom all summer long. And
this is a host plant also for the common Buckeye butterfly,
which is a gorgeous butterfly.
Yes,
has to be one of my favorites too. but easy to establish. I've seen it in the nurseries, but it's easy to start from seed as well.
Yeah, really easy to start from seed. Like literally, even if you were to find some seed capsules from last year and grab them right now and put them down today, by fall you already have some growing.
Okay, we've got one more question, but it's some information too. I have a little 50-foot green belt, weed belt, behind my yard. It is mostly filled with Johnson grass weed, and I keep going out there cutting it back. I planted some flame acanthus back there, full sun. How often do flame acanthus need to be watered if there is no rain? It says they are drought tolerant, but I see some yellow leaves.
So actually those yellow leaves are probably because it got too much water. Maybe when we were having all this rain in the past months, that's probably why. Usually yellow leaves mean too much water. Just let it dry out, because flame acanthus is one that you can plant it, and I forgot about it and never water it the whole year. And it
Until
does
you
just
look and
fine.
go, oh my gosh,
Yes.
look at you, you're huge now. Wait a minute. Yeah.
So most likely those yellowing leaves are because within the last few, 3 weeks ago, we were just drenched with rain. So it had too much rain at that time, and now it's going to dry out and it is going to be just fine. You don't need to water it at all. And then it should be pretty close to starting to bloom. I have one or two starting to come up on my own right now, and that is a wonderful, wonderful nectar source for hummingbirds and butterflies. Host plant for the Texan crescent and the crimson patch butterflies. So you've got an excellent choice that you chose to put back there.
Yeah, and with the Johnson grass, you say you're cutting it back. When it gets moist, I try to go back and pull some as well, and maybe you might get a good handle on getting rid of some of it in a small area too. Because Johnson grass is a real challenge. So what do you want to do about time? I mean, we've got a couple more plants we could cover over there, or should we be wrapping up now? Or okay,
we have one more question though, but I think I can address it. Linda asks, how will you share the handout related to this session? So that's going to be uploaded on the Hardbrooker Park website. So as soon as you go onto the website and access this video, you'll be able to access the handout as well.
One more thing as well, if you're interested in native landscaping, the Native Plant Society, our state organization, has a program called the Native Landscape Certification Program, and it's currently a 4-level course. They're all-day classes that we'll do 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall. Introduction to native landscapes, landscape design, installation and maintenance. They're just creating one on stewardship, and there's one in native landscaping for birds, and they're all-day classes. We offer them here in San Antonio, and so if you're interested in learning a little more, we cover about 40 to 45 plants per class. You'll learn a lot about those and the whys and hows of why we use them. So check out our website again and look for the Native Landscape Certification Program on the drop down, and that's npsot.org/San Antonio. So
thanks guys for coming and joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it, and well, as you can tell, we could go on and on. In person, this could easily last 2 hours.
Easily,
so
yes, definitely.
Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you everybody so much for attending this morning. If you have any interest in helping to support programs like today's, you're welcome to go on to the Phil Hardbrooker Park website and make a small donation of $5 or $10. We would really appreciate it. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend.